interview
Wow.
this weekend, but you're my final interview.
So you got it down.
We got it down, and we're live with Ted and Marshall.
Hello, I'm Ted.
I'm Marshall.
Nice to meet you guys. You had the shortest film at this film festival, and it's super heartfelt and it's so cool, and I'm happy to talk to you about it. Tell us a little bit about this film and the production of it and what you were going for before I hammer into my questions, which I'm assuming you have not seen in advance, right? You haven't seen my questions in advance? Okay, so these are going to be totally spontaneous answers. That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, really, we were going for, we knew we wanted to make a short film, in lockdown. I mean, part of it stemmed from boredom a little bit. Like, we wanted to sink our teeth into something. It had been almost over a year since we had done a short film, so we figured time is right to do this. We're kind of chomping at the bit to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then being in lockdown also kind of was the inspiration for the story as well.
Yeah, Marsh was just pitching me some ideas for some films in the backyard, and then he just says, like, I have this idea. He's like, I don't really know where it's going, but I've got this idea of just like this guy who's born upside down. And I thought that was the funniest thing. I was just like it's got to be that. And so we just kind of started riffing on like, okay, so what is this story like? Like, if it's just this one idea, this guy born upside down, like, how does this all like what's the story behind it? And yeah, like the isolation, the feeling of isolation, just kind of from lockdown, just kind of fit perfectly into that idea, and just kind of rolled with it from there.
That's interesting. Yeah, I remember reading a little bit about your production, and that was really cool. How much you had captured the emotions and the feeling of this entire year in 3 minutes, and I thought that was super cool because artists are often holding a mirror to society, and there's like this collective consciousness in which I guess all artists are sort of feeling the pulse of people, and so sometimes you do end up like with 500 films about isolation after a year of isolation.
Yeah.
But this was a really cool way to explore it. I think there's nothing inherently wrong with making something about something that's happening in the world. But I just think that you should be creative and original about it. And this film is clearly that. So I'm gonna get into my questions, my scripted questions, before I go off the beaten path for half an hour and wax poetic about how cool it is to have someone born upside down. The concept of your film is so fascinating. Did you want to explain what Calvin's condition is a metaphor for, and how did you think to put that into a film?
Yeah, for sure. So it's definitely a kind of obvious metaphor for the feeling of our lives kind of turning upside down during the pandemic, and kind of the isolation that people feel because of that, being cut off from your friends and things like that, and kind of the anxiety that stems from that, but then also how connections to each other can be what makes that experience a little bit less terrifying.
Yeah. It's one of those things where there's nothing really wrong with Calvin. It's not like he's just upside down. Like, that's the only thing that's different about him. And I think there's everybody has had this opportunity of like reflection, and it just kind of like, there's just something about him being upside down where you're just like, yeah, that's how I feel too. And I think just, even though the whole world's kind of like feeling this way, you each individually kind of are feeling that way too. And like, yeah, this kind of just has that chance to sort of explore that feeling of just kind of feeling like an outcast, and having that opportunity to connect with somebody over something personal and meaningful.
Does leaving something like open-ended allow the audience to map their own feelings onto it a little bit more easily?
Yeah, it's something we like to do, especially in short films. It's almost like you don't give not the third act, but like you don't give the denouement, and then you can kind of let audience members choose their own ending of how did it turn out. And yeah, these are a little bit more ambiguous, but especially with something that's so short, it almost lets you kind of extend your film into time a little bit by letting people choose their own ending.
It's a really beautiful way of saying that. Um, what questions or feelings did this film help you explore and answer? Like, was this personal?
Yeah, like we realized as we were kind of answering, kind of like that question of like, well, so why are we making this? So what is, as we were coming up with that story, kind of exploring a relationship that it's between a man and a woman, but we wanted to make it less romantic and a little bit more on the like friendly neighbor side as we were actually making this movie and trying to kind of find locations. We live in a big city. We live in Toronto, Canada, and some of the first times that we'd actually talk to some of our neighbors was when they saw us filming or when we asked if we could borrow their front porch to film on. And so we realized that even though we're in lockdown, it might be some of those simpler kind of like casual relationships that you find with people. It's just a conversation you strike up with people that can be important and meaningful versus those kind of more like romantic, really life-changing ones that, yeah.
And also for me, there was that aspect of just like how Calvin has been like dead set on being an astronaut and wanting to get into space because that's like his ideal scenario, because in space he could be upside down or right side up, it doesn't matter. It's he's in space, so he's floating, and that's like where he wants to be. And then that like having that other person come into your life, and then just like having that kind of switch gears towards like, okay, well actually like there is something on this planet kind of worth sticking around for, that connection with somebody. It was just like the right time for that story to be told. Especially for me, it was just kind of a cool thing to explore personally. But I think that is very relevant as well for a lot of people.
Interesting. I'm kind of curious. The dynamic between two people who direct together. I mean, you're colloquially known as the Jefferies brothers. Like, we had 4 or 5 people message us after we selected your film saying, "Oh, I've worked with the Jefferies brothers. I've never heard you referred to as anything but the Jefferies brothers. This is either like masterful marketing or you guys are tied at the hip." But I'm kind of curious what that dynamic's like, because you are individual people. Unless I can't see your hips, are you attached? No. Okay. You are individual people. I'm assuming you both have your strengths and weaknesses. You obviously wear different hats on set, even though you both take director credits, like you use acting. What's the strengths? What are the weaknesses? How do you complement each other?
So
it's a therapy session now, by the way.
Yeah, for sure. We're gonna
work some shit out.
Yeah, this might be the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
No, I mean, one thing to note is that because we do all of our pre-production together, we spend a lot of time before we end up actually on set talking about what we want the film to be. And that kind of ends up being the opportunity we get to both kind of bounce ideas around and then equally contribute, but then whittle that down so that we have a pretty clear idea of what we're going for on set on the day, so that when we are filming, we both landed on the same idea of what we want. And that makes it a lot easier to both work together towards that one thing. It's a pretty clear picture that we both have once we get to that point, but definitely during pre-production, it's all just throwing ideas at the wall and seeing what sticks. But yeah, it takes a lot of effort to get to that point.
Yeah, we started out like neither of us studied film in school or anything like that. He comes from a writing background, I come from an acting background, and we both just decided we wanted to get into filmmaking. So like we taught ourselves how a camera works, how to shoot a scene like over the shoulder, like everything. We had to learn it all together. So I think that really helped our dynamic on set of just sort of like starting from the same level, but then also having our strengths as like Marsh is the writer and myself as the actor. So when it comes down to like we put in our hours now so that we flow really well together, so that when we call cut and we know that we're both serving the story, Marsh can then we have that trust to say Marsh could go off and like talk to the camera and crew. I can go talk to the actors because we're both we're both working to serve the story. And so we can kind of split up and sort of make that happen in different departments and kind of cover a lot of ground that way.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I don't know what I'm fishing for here personally, but I'm just, because we had a discussion with, I don't know if you caught the first Q&A after Story Over Everything, a short block, but we had a director there who had directed a film with his brother, and his brother happens to be an Oscar-nominated director. Wow. And he's like a journalist who's like one of the most famous journalists in Spain. And I was asking him, like, how does that dynamic work? And he was pretty blunt about it. And he's like, okay, I'm really, really great with people, and he's like a visionary director. And so I deal with like the people because he doesn't know how to deal with people, and he knows where to put the camera, right? So I'm always curious when people wear, you know, the director hat together, you know, because it's kind of like the buck stops here, right? That director call, right? Cut. So it's always interesting to me to like know how two people can make each other better in that situation, and how those strengths and weaknesses complement each other. So I mean, I'm not necessarily talking about your backgrounds if one person is an actor and the other person's you know, like coming from a writing background, because both writers and actors can be directors. But I'm talking more of like a like a personal thing, you know, like, because I mean, I've heard a quote. It's that being a director is like having to be equal parts mother and father, right?
Yeah.
Right. Because it is both. And actually, this is this is like a hot take. I think women are better at directing for that reason. Generally, just a general assumption, because women are generally better at taking on a masculine role than men are taking on a feminine role. Mm-hmm. That's just throwing it out there, just throwing it out into the internet world. Yeah, and I mean, it's strange to me because like two people, that's two different set of strengths and two different set of weaknesses. So I'm always interested to know how those complement each other. So now that I've drastically expanded the question and reframed it a little bit, do you have a slightly different answer? If not, that's fine. I'm not fishing for anybody.
Yeah, I would say that like we definitely have to butt heads on some things where like I definitely see it going this way, and Marsh like definitely sees it going this way. And like it's one of those things we've done the pre-production, we've written the script together, and like all of a sudden you're on set and on location, and it's it's just something isn't feasible the way that you kind of planned it. And I'm just like and we were able, like, because we edit as well, like it always comes down to the editing room. We're just like, if we shoot it this way and this way and this way, we can edit together this way. But then it'll just be like, no, like it has to be this way. So we've had it's the luxury sometimes of being able to shoot both if we have the time and the resources to do it, and we can decide later. But when that happens, like you're balancing crew and cast waiting around. I mean, you never just have like hours to spare on set, so you have to make fast decisions.
It kind of reminds me of something our parents told us about kind of making a relationship work, or like making parenting work, and it's whoever cares more, they get to have their way. And so that's kind of a way to just trust that whoever cares more about something probably has their eye on the ball a little bit, knows what they're doing. But yeah, those moments are pretty rare.
Yeah, they don't happen very often.
Yeah, definitely when you brought up the filmmaking brothers, that is pretty relatable, I'd say, for me, in terms of like just people skills. Like I think once I'm on set, I'm very comfortable, but getting to that point, Ted as an actor, I think, has like made the connections, especially with actors. So when it comes time to cast people, we have this like just this huge range of actors that we've met through TED that we can work with. And I'm not sure if kind of my personality works as well, of like putting myself out there and meeting all those people.
I think it's a symbiotic relationship sometimes where there's like complementary, energies.
Yeah.
Not to get way too abstract here, but sometimes like someone being really outgoing, like I'm assuming, one of you is extremely outgoing and, like, yeah, well, I mean, you don't become an actor by accident, right? This is not But I mean, being more reserved, I think that having two directors that have different personalities can allow at least the cast to at least vibe with one person, because I can tell you that there are a lot of people that feel very uncomfortable around people who are super outgoing and just feel way more comfortable around someone who's a little bit more reserved and within themselves, And so I think that, you guys can carry those two energies. And again, I don't know if I should even say this, but the 5 people who reached out to us after we selected your film, they adore you. Like they love working with you. They were just like, oh my God, I worked with them. They're so cool. They're so this and that. So, whatever you're doing is great. And as we were talking about with Mark Grasso yesterday, there's no way around being a jackass in this industry. If people don't want to work with you, you never make it. Like I'm tired of hearing cases of people who were like, a nightmare to work with and they made it. Yeah, maybe that's very rare though. But the average person who actually makes it in this industry is just a genuinely cool person to be around, and people like to be around those people. And it seems like you guys are really those kinds of people. So that leads me to my final question, which is what's next?
That's a good question. Yeah, maybe the best one of all. We're going to spend this upcoming summer working on the next project. And we've kind of hit a point in our career where when we approach a story, that's kind of how we approach it, is this is a story first, instead of trying to shoehorn that idea into this is a feature, this is a TV show. You develop the characters, you develop the story, and then see what medium is it appropriate for. Kind of what we would like to do, and the next step would be to write a feature and sell something like that. And if we could be attached to direct, we would love to do that. And then maybe also just because we really enjoy doing short films, probably pepper one or two of those in there as well.
I don't think there's anything ever wrong with going back to shorts.
Yeah.
They're super fun.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it just comes down to the story that you're trying to tell. There are certain stories that just don't stretch past 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think most really bad features usually are either just pitifully written, or they should have been shorts and they were just a stretched concept that just didn't have any weight to it. So I'm really interested to see what you guys do with a feature format, because obviously you've figured out pacing really well. You guys, I think there's a lot going. And honestly, I think a lot of people misunderstand 3 minutes, like 3 minutes short. So what? 3 minutes, whatever. It's really hard to tell a really good story in 3 minutes. It's really hard. So congratulations on that. There's a little question here, which I'm very surprised by the way, because like people are exhausted. People are like reading out to us. They're like, you made us look at screens, and then you made us look at another screen, and all of your Q&As are way longer than they're listed. I mean, the last one went for an hour and a half. The one before went for an hour and a half. People just do not have the fatigue for this. But honestly, I think it's just so cool to be able to talk to filmmakers, because this is like kind of what's been missing, like to just be able to chit chat about your film. Which, like, I mean, okay, such a clever film. How are you able to find someone to be? Well, it's him. He's the one who did it. So
yeah, it was. Man, that was an absolute obstacle that we weren't sure. Like, we did a lot of tests. This is one of those things where, like, so for this film specifically, Marsh took on more of the directing role because I had to be upside down for a lot of it. And we did a lot of planning and a lot of assuming of just like being upside down is going to be difficult. With that, like with having figured that out, we're just like, insurance alone, we were just like, I don't think we can cast anybody other than like just me doing it. Like safety reasons, commitment to like doing it.
Just how hard it is to be upside down for that long. That's a tough ask.
Yeah.
To ask for a friend to do.
I tried doing it after I watched your film. I lasted less than 1 second. I couldn't even make it.
We actually had to Google like how long can a human being safely be upside down for, and make sure that we were operating well within those limits.
Yeah. So it was a challenge. It was like it definitely was a challenge. It was very uncomfortable in a fun, challenging way. Like I don't regret doing it at all. It's super fun. But yeah, it was one of those things where like if this was a 4-minute film, that would have been pushing it. Like there's no way this could be like a feature without figuring something else out. But
it's definitely the first short film where Ted actually had to do like the workouts, like the physical work that goes into preparing for a role, which is something I think usually gets you in the Hollywood range a little bit more. But yeah, like actually practicing being upside down before we started filming.
That's super interesting. I think my prayer for you too is that you get $1 million budget for your next film and you're just able to hire a stunt double who's able to do this convincingly, and then hire a bit of CGI, composite your face onto it, and just do it the way everybody else does it. You know,
Perfect.
like no more being upside down. This is like this like might be a metaphor for being an indie filmmaker, actually. Right?
Yeah. You have to do it the hard way.
Right? Yeah. Anyways, man, thank you so much to both of you for coming on. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for all the shout outs. I want everyone to know that we never asked the filmmaker to do this. We don't ask filmmakers to do this. I think it's kind of tacky to do so. I know implicitly as a festival director that it helps a hell of a lot when filmmakers do some aggressive marketing and some creative marketing for their own films. Believe me, it will always help. We were literally talking with honestly, if you guys have a moment, check out, like over the next few days, check out some of the panels that were on this. You know, it'll help you so much with festivals and festival strategy. We had Ariana Farina on talking about, festival strategy and marketing. And since you guys submit to film festivals, I think you should definitely watch it. And then we had a programmer tips panel with Robin Citizen from TIFF. And I don't know if we just did a really bad job marketing this, but at one point I was like, there's only 80 people watching it. Did we fuck this up somehow? But yeah, they were talking about how important it is to. I've lost my train of thought. I thought I could fumble. I thought I could just like float my way into it, but I've really lost my train of thought because I started going back to the memory of seeing 80, and I was like, fuck, But anyways, I think it's like super relevant to you guys to check out those things. And they were talking. Sorry, now I've caught my train of thought. A little bit tired. So it was Ariana Farina who said that filmmakers have to market their own films, and that when you do so at a really good film festival, especially live, that they've seen like 500 people in the audience because a filmmaker got really, really creative with their festival marketing. And people think it's just about that, but what ends up happening, just sorry to like wax poetic here for a second, but like what ends up happening is that some indie producer, some studio exec ends up seeing that, and then they end up seeing the Q&A, and that's the person who gets financed because that's the person who had the full crowd. They don't know how hard that person had to work to get a full crowd. They don't know if that person had to beg for favors. They don't know if that person had to because they get a standing ovation because everyone who came there came for them, right?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So you guys are kind of onto something really smart, and I hope you keep it up because it's super duper smart to to help festivals market your films. And I mean, I remember my film was selected to a short block here, and I don't think I didn't do anything close to what you guys did for that film festival. So no offense to them, but I did blast it out a little bit. I was like, hey, I'm gonna be at this film festival. My film's doing a Toronto premiere or whatever, and we had close to 80, 90 people in the crowd for me, pretty much for our film. And we had like 20 people in the crowd for every other short film. Wow. So all the Q&A questions are getting directed to me. All right. And then the minute we leave, the next feature starts, and then they're like, hey, everyone can just stay if you want to stay for the feature, so you can sell tickets. And people just left. They're like, oh, we were here for Rob's film. So that, like, if somebody observed that, they would be like, oh, this is the type of person you actually want to support, right? You know, so I just think that it really helps with your career path if you can do that for your own film, because I think it inspires confidence in people that you care, you know? So kudos on that. And I just wanted to point that out to any other festival directors who are watching, because there's like 30 festival directors attending this film festival. So, you know,
Wow.
I'm kind of hoping that they check out, and that's why I'm dragging out these conversations longer, because sometimes, you know, as a festival, like especially as a bigger film festival than Pendance, because we don't care. Like, we don't care who you are. Like, when we select you, we have very little to lose. We're not TIFF, we're not Sundance, you know. Like, if you end up being a psycho, like raging off and saying racial shit, like whatever, we'll just delete it. Like, we're not too concerned about that stuff. But I know that a lot of bigger film festivals sometimes can be a little bit concerned. Like, this person didn't come through the Sundance Institute, and this person didn't come through this pipeline. So who are they? So I think sometimes these Q&As give people a little window into like, hey, what would it be like to select this type of filmmaker to our festival? So yeah, it's always, I don't know.
Cool. Well, I mean, like, we definitely see this film festival picking up a lot of steam, and I could see this becoming like one of the next big Toronto film festivals, and we're super excited to be part of it as it's in its kind of younger years.
Yeah, this is definitely a great stepping stone for us, and we're excited if it can do things for us.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I've always dreamt of Pendance being the type of film festival that could like actually help somebody, and not just be a laurel on somebody's poster, which I think is kind of lame, and I don't ever want to be that, actually. So we always do a little bit of marketing afterwards. So just I don't know why the hell I'm saying this. We're still recording, like, but whatever. Like, I've lost notion of the fact of recording. But yeah, like, we always do a little bit of marketing after. We always like message a few festivals and say like, hey, you might be really interested in this film. You should reach out to this filmmaker or whatever. So I don't know. Our entire ethos. Like, I don't know if you know who's on our team, but like, our entire team is all filmmakers. So the entire, you know, like, concept of Pendance is like everything we ever wanted as filmmakers. We're just gonna give it to filmmakers. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. Anyways, guys, have a great night. Thanks for staying up. Thanks for staying up so late. Thanks. Yeah. Have a good one.
Same.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.